Hey everyone, this is Lance from Particle. Today in Scripting with Particle, we're going to learn to do a very basic thing. And what is that? Well, we're going to use the Particle Cloud API to take a single device, put it in a specific product, and give it a name. Sound easy enough? Great. Now, let's just quickly, while we're doing this, talk about why we're doing this. All of your devices need to go into a product, and especially when you start manufacturing and have fleets, it is super important to have a product, to identify said devices, to set specific firmware for these devices. And we can get into firmware and how to do that later on, but in this video, we're just going to show you the basics to Bash, just so you know. And the great part is, in our follow-up video to this, you'll essentially be learning how to take multiple, if not thousands of devices from an actual text file and run it through with bash coding, which will look similar to what we're about to do. So hang on tight and let's get started. So first things first, let's go ahead and type in code and then let's give this thing a name, shall we? Let's call it add device to product. .sh. Now, notice that .sh, that is important, right? If you've ever heard of bash, this is important. It's a shell. So let's go ahead and do this. And with the Workbench application or Visual Studio Code, you'll notice that typing code in the little terminal down below will now allow you to create that file, open it, and prepare for you to type. So first things first, in the bash script, you do need this path. Now, could it run without it? Yeah, but let's not do that. Let's start out with some variables. Now, you may be used to other languages where you have to do like a var or let or maybe a const. You don't do that here, right? That's what's a little interesting about bash scripting. Particle and bash scripting, they go along, right? So let's go ahead and make a variable for our token. This is something that we're going to need, so we'll do that. No spaces, double quotes. And then we will put in our product ID, right? Because we want to define where we want this device to go to. So product ID could look something like this. And again, you can name it whatever you want. Device ID, like that as well. We're looking good. Now, just because we are going to do this for learning purposes, let's set in a unique name. And again, normally this name property should be your serial number. Now, if you've used our node script for manufacturing, you know that this happens automatically for you. But during our scripting session here at Particle, you're going to learn a lot of these best practices and how-tos. So hang on tight and prepare for other videos to come. So let's go ahead and type in name now. And voila. Looks good, right? I agree. Now let's set things up. We're going to do something that's going to help us take a response and essentially populate it into a text file that we're just going to call devices. But what we need to do now is set name. And let's go ahead and make a curl request. And if you've ever been in the Particle console, you probably have seen these curl requests that we automatically populate for you that you could just copy and paste and put into a terminal. Well, it does not require bash specifically because curl is its own application. And one great thing about running on Linux or OS X, we have the ability to make a call to curl and utilize it, right? So we're going to go ahead and use the put command. And the purpose of this is because we're going to put this information via JSON to the Particle Cloud API. And it's going to know what we want to do. We've done that. Now, what we need to do is give it the endpoint. What is that exactly? Well, that's the address that is needed so the Particle API knows what's being called, how it's being called, what variables need to be passed through that, and just what we need to use. So let's go ahead and type in HTTPS, and that is important. We are not using HTTP. We prefer everything to be secure. So let's call the api.particle.io. Let's run that version 1, and let's go to products. Okay, so we're going to run product ID. And if you noticed, that variable just became highlighted. So we know there is a variable for this and it's being called, right? So the next thing, the other part to this endpoint is going to be devices, right? And now, which device are we going to add? Well, right now we're not going to take anything from a text file. We're just going to pass one single ID, okay? So that is going to look something like device ID, right? Because Bash now knows that we have this device ID and it's up above. And the Particle Workbench knows this, or Visual Studio knows this as well. So the next step is we're going to put in this slash, which allows us to go down to the next line and populate more information. I always like the tab where this API is, just because visually I like it. So we're going to pass tact D, and then we're going to put in name, as we talked about above, right? And what we're going to do is literally pass in name, like that. And let's go ahead and put another slash so we could go to the next line. And look how nice that is, minus D. And now we need to do the infamous access token. That is something that you will need if you're on a team from your administrator, or if you are the administrator, this access token is vital, right? You can get it very quickly in your product by going into your Particle console, go into the product itself, and then you will be given the ability in the event viewer to access that access token. Let's go ahead and pass in equal sign. And as you can imagine, we need to pass token, right? So that right there, my friends, is essentially allowing us to use this variable called setName and throw in a curl request, much like what you would see on the Particle website. So let's go ahead and save everything that we're doing into a file. This is good because it's nice to know what is actually being populated and if it's successful. So we're going to echo this set name, right? Because it's basically a variable, even though it's a curl request. So we're just going to call this device name.txt, right? Just because it's a single thing here. And voila. This right here will take a device ID, put it inside of a specific product, give it a specific name, and with that special token ID that you generate, you now have one new device in your product. And that's it. 12 lines of code here, and you're ready to go. And this is our first Bash intro for you into using the Particle Cloud API without needing Node.js and without needing the Particle CLI. You are literally using the basics to your operating system to do this. No funny business to install unless your system doesn't have curl. That's it. I'm Lance for Particle. This is part of our Particle scaling series, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.